Welcome back to our podcast at AIX. My guest today is Faraz Hussain. He's from the US and he's an early adopter of artificial intelligence. Faraz, very happy to have you here today. Please tell us a few words about yourself.
Mark, it's a pleasure and pleasure to meet you. Been following you for quite a while. It is true, I am an early adopter of AI, but especially from the generative AI. But just to give you a quick background, I am a pre-sales solutions consultant, sales engineer, solutions engineer. There's a whole lot of terms for us in the field. But I began my journey as a programmer. Sometimes many of us do in the technical world. Moved on to consulting in hospitality, then to petrochemical, IoT, marketing, and today we'll see where it takes us. So I have had a very varied journey, spending time both in roles domestic in the US and international abroad. Great example, you're familiar since you're in the area, having to go into Abu Dhabi refineries at 115 degrees Fahrenheit, or as we say, 45 degrees, all the way out to going in the Montana winters in negative 15 degrees. So it's a lot of fun when you get a varied job like this.
Can imagine, yeah? Okay. So what is your life with artificial intelligence? How does this look like? What you are currently doing with AI? Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, being an early adopter, I was exposed to LLMs, or rather in this case, ChatGPT, when it first came out in the 3.0, or whether there was 2.5 somewhat running around in GitHub's testing, but 3.0 was first launched. I had this aha moment initially when I was a part of my role a lot is to help integrate with APIs and different systems and connectivity, and I had the chance to test out the ability to actually help me code and build interfaces. And that's when I heard my first aha moment, like, oh, wait a minute, this just shaved off 50% of my time that I would spend trying to figure out the API instructions and so on and so forth. So from that point onwards,
when was this point? Which year?
This was, I would say, about early 22, maybe, early 22, March and April. I believe it was just launched and you had to sign up before the waiting list got into a couple of months when they actually allowed you access. So it was those early times, and again, there were a lot of hallucinations. It wasn't that you could just hand it off, but coding was surprisingly a lot, I would say, more accurate, or I would say almost less prone to errors and hallucination at that time. Probably the simpler ones compared to the actual generation of text, which back then, a lot of hallucinations and the typical, of course, the AI characteristic usage of words. We'll give you a good example. AI loves to use the ideas of in this exciting world of, or delve and so on and so forth. So you could see those language inflections come in. But that was my exposure to the LLM side. I'm not completely, I would say, opaque to the usage of AI. I know today's AI is all centered on generative AI, LLMs, and so on and so forth. But if you think about machine learning, that's been around for such a long time. So my earliest exposure to ML, apart from early education, was I was part of a product manager, or in dual hats, to create a ML analysis system for taking asset measurements. One of my roles was in asset monitoring, liquid level monitoring. So we would use IoT devices to actually measure all the levels around, and again, hundreds of thousands of tanks, use that to predict when each would run out. And based on those predictions, we're able to route refill tankers and personnel to go and service those tanks. So that was one of those earliest moments of understanding weights and models and so on and so forth, actually applying them in practical life.
Amazing. If you think about AI tools, there are on our tool scout, we have 3,000 tools already. So there are a lot of tools in this market. If you see your daily work, your private life, what are the AI tools you really like, or which AI tools you are using, and why is it like that?
Just to echo what you mentioned, the 3,000 tools, Gartner's predicting it's going to be multiples of that in the next couple of years. I don't know if you've had a chance to review it. I was looking at a tool called WordWare recently, which you can use prompts to generate entire workflows. So I think just to take this quick segue, the level required to be a founder now is completely dropped down. The barrier to entry is completely reduced. So again, lots of tools coming up. But in my daily use, I think I'm still very much centered around OpenAI's Anthropic's models, and of course perplexity. So if in general I'm probably using my custom GPTs in ChatGPT, some artifacts that I built out in Claude that are custom to me, and then perplexity is more towards the search perspective, but also because again I'm in sales, to be able to research different companies and firms. Perplexity is very good with what it does in that particular use.
Any other specific tools you know, which probably not everyone knows, which you like to use for some specific purposes?
I think I'm still very much a user of the common tools. Well, again, I mentioned the most common chatbots. I'm also a good, very frequent user of MidJourney. One tool that is that I've tried to use, it's common for marketing terms, but because we use ChatGPT a lot, is writer and copy. And there's two reasons behind that. As we know, OpenAI is using public models, and then there is a way to actually train, although I don't like to use the word train, it's more by vector data, but able to train the model. With writer and copy AI, you can actually provide it your own database and your specific training data and your writing style or speaking style, and get more, I would almost say, on-brand results. So that's something I use a bit more common than, I guess, ChatGPT, and for my work roles, and sometimes also for writing blogs and LinkedIn posts.
How do you see the development of AI, or specifically Gen AI? So it started now more than 1.5 years ago with the introduction of ChatGPT, the Gen AI wave. How do you think it will continue? What is coming next? What will be the next developments? How is it going to be in the next months and years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm going to refer back to the Gartner hype cycle. It's not completely the gospel of truth, but there is that we're in currently the hype curve of the cycle, where everything is, wow, it's going to be the next solution to all our problems in terms of what generative AI can do. We are approaching a lot of interesting results, especially with how everything from image to text generation is helping. But in what I see the most impact coming in, and we're seeing some of that, is actually the use of generative AI, or rather LLMs and large language models and agentic AIs, in helping us analyze data and solve common problems. Chatbots are a very common use case, but what's actually happening on the back end to go ahead and be able to analyze responses, use them to essentially, as we do with generative AI, measure against the known data and then provide responses. I think that the accuracy of that is going to improve, and the natural responses of that's going to improve. And if you go beyond chatbots into analysis of data, in everything from, as we've seen today with Salesforce, Einstein AI, we've got marketing where they're doing with lead scoring and so on and so forth. But then heading away from that to think about, as I mentioned earlier, analysis of data in, I'm going to say, petrochemical, in IoT, in supply chain. That's close to your heart. That's probably where the development is going to go, as we start realizing that the application is great when you have to generate something, but actually be able to understand data and help you get this quick picture. I wrote a concept almost 1.5 years ago, which I called IntelliCompose. I hope I'm not trademarking anybody's term, but my thought was that eventually where we're going to end up is, and I'm probably going to bounce a little bit of a question back to you as well, Martin, just to get your thoughts on this, is if you think about a firm and all the different tools that go into it, going beyond supply chain. So let's think about Coca-Cola supply chain, there's marketing and so on and so forth. AI could provide a common layer framework where it could read off all your data, everything that you have, and then be able to create agentic artifacts, but at the same time provide you interfaces. So if I'm going to say, hey, marketing supply chain, present him an interface that takes everything you know, including supply chain data, present him what he needs to understand. But if somebody's in marketing but wants to understand a little bit what's happening in different aspects, provide them a different dashboard and view altogether. So in a way, AI becomes this proverbial ocean of data where you can kind of read off and provide different instructions. So that to me seems like the eventual direction where we may end up going. And tools which are very specific to needs may still stay, but larger companies may end up deploying AI models in a way where, as I said, they become this proverbial soup where you can kind of ask for any data, get any answer, any dashboard, and of course get more productive in your day-to-day routines.
That will be amazing. How do you see the readiness of companies for this? Because there are a lot of surveys where companies basically say, yes, we are planning to implement AI tools or AI in our processes, but so far they are doing very little in this regard. How do you see the readiness for all these future developments which are about to come?
Yeah. Again, interesting question. Just even in my day-to-day role, I've noticed a change in the past 3 to 4 months. And when I say that is we've been seeing this hype, but then there's a certain trepidation. Part of that stems from the idea of privacy and data security in AI. It's going to be a big concern. We saw the European Union pass those AI laws a few months ago. Again, and the reasoning behind that is the privacy aspects of AI are still not very clear, especially with the open tools that we have. We've got 3 or 4 top models that are open source, but still being owned by companies like OpenAI, or in this case, you could have Microsoft, Anthropic, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to even larger organizations, their own concerns are, one, of course, the privacy of data, proprietary information, PII, personal information, there's card data, HIPAA, and so on and so forth. How to manage that while still allowing the productivity gains. So what I've actually noticed in the past couple of months is initially it was, if your product has AI, please let us know how you deploy it, where it's being used, the data, and so on and so forth. There was a lot of trepidation how to adopt it. AI became part of security questionnaires for a lot of integration perspectives. And now I'm noticing something else as a trend is, if it depends on company size, and well, it's not a rule, but SMBs are more open to adopting AI, and they actually ask for AI products to be able to kind of reduce costs. On the other hand, larger corporations, your Fortune 500s, your 100s, are way more concerned about how you're using AI, and they're also a lot more strict in how they're clamping down upon the use of open models, such as, of course, as I mentioned, ChatGPT, Claude, and so on, the open tools in their workplace. There's a recent report Microsoft just published today, essentially on AI adoption, and it's interesting because I was expecting a lot more on the generative part in terms of text creation. And again, this was confined to Microsoft tools, but they were talking about how the usage of Copilot is a lot more in terms of the developer side. There's definitely on the usage between products like Word and Excel, but there's a lot more on the developer side to code together, to check code, versus what they were expecting on the generative text side. So it just tells you a different adoption, methodologies that are going around in the market.
What are you telling companies if they ask you what should we use AI for? What should be the first area in the company we should start implementing this? What is your opinion in which area of the companies, if you say marketing, sales, procurement, production, R&D, which areas should, or which departments should start with the implementation of AI?
It's a broad question, Mark, but I think the first thing that I always start off is have a plan. So be very clear in what you intend to do, what the goals have to be, what you're expecting out of AI, and then create a pathway for it, how we will deploy it, consider all the applications, as I mentioned, of implications of privacy and security and proprietary information and so on and so forth. And again, this applies across the board in different roles, and you could, as you mentioned, sales, marketing, supply chain, R&D, and so on and so forth. And once you've considered all those implications, only then think about deploying AI. There's an interesting comment I heard a couple of months back when I was speaking to a group of investors, and this was just on a local coffee table thing, which is everybody wanted AI, but they had no idea how they wanted it and what they wanted to do with it. So to use a rather mixed analogy, AI became the new, from my perspective, the new organic. Everything had to be organic, as if we have in food products. We just didn't know what that meant very properly. So probably in my view, if you want to start, take the lowest hanging fruit. Everything that you do in sales is going to involve PII, personal information, and especially with Europe and GDPR and all these different considerations, that you may end up having to look into your legal concerns and so on and so forth. And that also applies different ways. So R&D may be a good place to start with programmers and developers if you can secure your proprietary information. And on the flip side, you can probably go from there and think about internal processes, internal back and forth, let's say on basic emails and internal chats, just to summarize notes and so on and so forth. It's actually when you start getting into using customers' data, using individuals' data, is where the problem with, I won't say problems, rather the hurdles in terms of passing those legal concerns with AI start occurring.
So how can you prevent any problems here? So how can you protect your data? How can you make sure that there's no one stealing data from you? That's not suddenly your data is with everyone. So how can you prevent this? Especially in the big companies, they will have a lot of solutions for this. Especially if you are a small business, how can you make sure that this is not happening?
Yeah. So as you rightly pointed out, big companies have the budget to deploy their own models, deploy their own servers, and have a lot more protections in place. Although, just as a quick side note on that, even in that, it really matters, especially for MNCs, where you're storing the data. Again, Europe is very strict as to how the data is taken out. So you have controls that you cannot take data out. Even in countries such as the US, there are controls to prevent that, and you have to really include those in your terms and conditions. But in terms of smaller companies, I would probably think about looking at, and it depends again if you're using open models, using GPT-4o and so on and so forth, is to ensure that you've conveyed the privacy concerns as you're deploying them in very clear consent to your users. A lot of the AI models were deployed. They are now in very secure servers. They've the best that everybody can do. Although we saw recently, even the most ubiquitous deployments such as CrowdStrike can have issues. But in general, what you want to do as a smaller company is to have that clear consent available to your customers upfront. And while the US is not that clear in enforcing these, EMEA should be very clear in having explicit consent that you're about to provide us data. We'll do our best to preserve it, but there are always untoward aspect. Incidents happen, and we'll make sure to inform you. The other thing that small businesses could do is that we're seeing that model deployment has getting away from these larger, huge models. Again, GPT-4 is a good example, Sonnet from Claude is an example, to where we're seeing companies like even with Meta and Mistral offering locally deployed models that can run on just a single GPU. And that's not such a huge expense. So if you're looking to initially start a scaling, and I'm giving a very simple example, as a marketing agency wanting to use LLMs for copy and image generation, today you can actually download something like Flux, and I'm about to try that myself, and run it on your own GPUs on a simple laptop, rather, not even a gaming heavy GPU computer, and not have to make all that expense. So the democratization, rather, of these models is about to happen, and we're going to see that occurring in the near future. It's not there yet. So at this point, rely on those T's and C's and clear privacy consent. But as you'll notice, eventually it's going to start democratizing, and you won't have to use these larger models if you're a smaller company.
So one thing is the data topic. What else do you think is a barrier or a hindrance for companies to implement AI in their processes?
Yeah, if we get past the data piece, and of course, as I said, have a plan piece of how to implement implement
And if you have a
AI
plan, of course,
in
yeah.
the day-to-day process. The next hindrance that you're probably going to see is mapping out more use cases. And then also, this is the flip side, it's adopting AI into your processes, but also being able to understand where AI may not have an impact. I was reading a post today where somebody made the claim that AI will replace all 9-to-5s, or rather, your 9-to-5 jobs will finish. And I had a little smirk and said, all right, so does that mean all the doctors can go home? Can your civil engineers no longer have to build bridges? Do we no longer have to have electricity turned on and things? So there are certain aspects where you'll be able to deploy AI and have success with it and be able to use it. But at the same time, there are certain reality checks where you do not have to deploy AI, and you may be able to use it as a assistant, as a tool, but it may not require your deployment of AI in that particular role, thinking more along heavy customer-facing roles. A good example is, today we're in social media, we're seeing the use of bots and other AI mechanisms to reach out to us for sales and promotions and so on and so forth. LinkedIn is flooded with email. We get email all the time that's written by copy. But there's also the backlash movement where we're seeing that's not genuine. It doesn't resonate with us yet. It's not there yet. We're seeing the likes of Altman and folks at Meta and so on and so forth talking about AGIs, but I feel that there's a balance between the critics and and there's a bit more pragmatism that's required to think that we're not there yet. Humans will still want a bit more interactivity. May not be true for B2C. It's going to get more easy, but especially when B2B and larger aspects such as sales, because I'm in that role, I feel the human interaction will still be an element where you cannot use AI all the time. As a great example, just as yourself, today it's possible that Synthesia can create a closed mark, but it's not going to have that human connection that you and I have having this conversation right now. So that's just my quick thought on where the limits are going to be.
Fully agree. If for the end of our talk, can you tell me a few use cases that you are using in your private life? So let's say, I mean, everyone knows the big advantages of ChatGPT, that you can write great text, that you can ask a lot of questions. But what are the use cases that Faraz is using for his private life, which probably not everyone knows?
Well, that's an interesting loaded question, but absolutely. So I do use it quite a bit in my private life. I'll give you a great example. I bought a home about a year ago, and I used ChatGPT to do a lot of analysis on the housing association documents, the legal documents, ensuring that I removed any confidential information. But for example, for the housing association documents, what's allowed? What can I change in the house without violating rules? What will I require permissions for? So on and so forth. So in what was a couple of 100 pages or so, where you have minutia and as we call the fine print, I was able to skip all of that, get the information that I need, and ask my questions, so I'm not violating anything and getting into fines when I start making some changes to the house. On the flip side, I'll use AI a lot, especially to help me plan out vacations at times. We'll use it for, especially with the new capabilities where you can take images and have them analyzed. I'm about to do this today, where I'm about to go and do some effort and fixing something that's wrong with my dryer. So I'm going to take an image of my dryer, upload it, see what it thinks what's going wrong in the vents and so on and so forth, and use that to do a DIY. So I probably have saved a couple of $100 or a lot more probably in repair fees by getting to learn a bit more DIY using AI as an assistant.
Okay, great examples. Faraz, thank you very much for this talk. It was really amazing, a lot of great information, and I'm looking forward to talk with you soon again. And most importantly, I forgot to tell this, I'm very happy that you are also an expert on AIX now, and I'm looking forward to the first course, which will hopefully also come from your side very soon.
Absolutely, Mark. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best, yeah? Thank you.
Take care.
I'm sure you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. And if you like videos like this, you should subscribe the channel, switch on the notification bell, because more or less every day we will upload videos like this with other experts of AIX. We already have more than 100 experts on our platform. And if you want to get to know them, if you want to get to know their opinion, you should come on this channel where you will see all those experts in interviews with me or with other co-founders of AIX. So see you very soon in one of our next videos.